How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk, and this is the show where we talk about all things making music. It could be the gear, the technique, the business, the philosophy, the creative process. It doesn't really matter. As long as it has something to do with making music and has some connection, I'm happy to talk about it. And I think with that philosophy, we've had a lot of really cool conversations over the 2 years we've been doing this. Today, I want to talk about the concept of being an artist that's more of an observer than a creator. We think of artists as creative people, but I want to try to turn it on its head and talk about the artist as an observer or a noticer. And what I like about this idea is when you become the observer or the noticer, it kind of takes you off the creative hook a little bit. So now your job isn't to make things, it's to find things, it's to notice things, it's to become aware of things. Right now you're hearing a little musical example of exactly what I'm talking about. So I just bought a new synth. I bought the Behringer Neutron. I know I talk a lot about resisting gear lust on this show, and I failed to do so with this Neutron. To my defense, and my justification, it was a really good deal. I think it was $269 on eBay. Said it was used, but it came in the box packaged up like a brand new synth. It looks great. The guy is actually selling a bunch of these, so I'm going to put the link in the show notes in case you want one too while they last. I have no idea if they will, but apparently he sold a lot. But I love this new synth. I'm really excited, happy I bought it. It's kind of first dipping the toes into the world of modular because it's got this really nice modular patching area. I mean, the Korg MS-20 has that too, and that's another synth I own that I love. But this is maybe a little more deep with the patching, and it's already taught me a ton. But the piece of music I'm letting you hear still is just an exploration of that synth as I'm learning it and getting used to it. All I did was program a 2-note pattern, just a C and an A. It's got this like A minor feel. And I'm running it through my Echo Noise Machine, which is a free Ableton Live pack that I released recently using Ableton's Echo. It's just an audio effect rack, but I've set it up in a way so that you can turn some knobs and just get some really cool feedback and noise just using the Echo device. The Behringer also has a delay on it, and the nice thing about the delay is it sort of feeds back into itself when you turn the repeats knob high enough. It keeps repeating and coming back into itself, that it creates this like crazy feedback that can get out of control really quickly. But it's a sound I really like. I'm really into it lately, and as maybe you've noticed in that piece of music, there's a lot of extra harmonic content, and it sounds like there's many more instruments playing than just one synthesizer and a kick drum. I did record that kick drum with the Behringer too. I was experimenting with trying to come up with a kick drum sound and came up with a few that I thought were cool and used a couple of those to hold down the beat. But how does this tie in with being a noticer or an observer more than a creator? Well, this kind of comes with something I spoke with Jason Timothy about on my podcast a few episodes back. There'll be a link to that as well in the show notes, where we were talking about when you get a new piece of gear to just record everything. And recording everything is going to be a real key point in this whole conversation. But he said that when he gets something new, he just hits record as he's learning it. And we might think that a lot of what you do is going to be pointless and silly and not make a lot of sense. But that's kind of what he's trying to capture. I love this idea because it really gets into the concept of exploration and observing and noticing. So you might do things on a new piece of gear you would never do normally once you understand it. And for me with the Neutron, the first thing that I did that I wouldn't probably do if I knew better was crank that repeats up all the way on its delay and start getting this wild feedback. And at first it was almost scary because, your speakers start going crazy and I'm just turning knobs and plugging cords into patch cables into different modulation sources. So I don't even really know what's making all this noise. So I kind of just like shut down the volume real quick. But as I was discovering this but through mistake and experimentation, I've started to learn some cool things, and I was recording it all and getting sounds out of it. This whole piece of music is just that. It's 2 notes with a lot of experimentation using especially the delay on the Behringer running into, as I said, my Echo Noise machine, which is a free download, which I may have said, but it will be in the show notes too. So when you get something new, when you're trying something that's unfamiliar, record it, because you're going to be experimenting and playing. It's this free time. It's unintentional. It's not deliberate. And a lot of cool things happen. And you might not realize that the cool things are happening at the time because you're trying to figure something out. You're trying to learn it. You're trying to understand it. You're not really playing to come up with good music. You're playing to come up with an understanding of your instrument. But we can do lots of cool things in that process. So we want to be more observant. And this is maybe a little bit related to this concept of, I've heard this about writers. Some writers are gardeners. Some writers are architects. So what the gardener does is they have their characters and maybe their basic plot points, but they kind of write as they go. They don't really know where things are going to wind up. They let the characters be themselves, and if new things need to happen to get them from point A to point B, they write it in. The architect is much more deliberate. They have things planned out. They know exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to get there, and then they start writing. Now, they're both interesting ways of approaching writing and making music, but I want to be the observer today. And if you've listened to my last podcast, which was 10 things to do when you're feeling uninspired, this is really a reflection of that and my own digging myself out of the hole, because being the creator is stressful and challenging, although it's very practical at certain times. I was sort of finding myself in a difficult position trying to do that. So now I'm just observing. I'm experimenting, letting things happen, and seeing what comes out of it. So how can we be more observant? We want to tune into our surroundings, our awareness, and notice little things. I've recently started doing some meditation for the new year. It's about 10 minutes a day I try to do. And one of the things you're really doing in the meditation I'm doing is just to pay attention to what's around you, to listen, to notice your thoughts. It's not a game of emptying your head. It's a game of noticing what's going on inside your head. And by doing that, you can sometimes find that you get yourself caught up in destructive thought patterns. I've noticed that myself. Comparison is a big thing. I notice when I'm doing my music, for instance, I get into comparing it to other artists I like or other songs that I like, and even work I've done in the past. And a lot of times that just short circuits my whole creative process, and you get depressed. My little unfinished baby idea sounds nowhere near as good as this Grammy Award-winning track, and you quit. And that's really not a good place to be. But through some meditation, I've really noticed when that happens, and I've been able to say, okay, I'm doing that in my head. Let's not do that anymore. Let's let that thought go. And every time you recognize a thought pattern, they say it's kind of like a bicep curl for the mind. Again, it's not about clearing your head. It's about noticing your head. And when you notice that you're thinking something or thinking in a destructive way, you can remind yourself that this is just a thought you're having. It's not reality. It's a thought that is maybe taking you for a ride, but it's really just a thought. It's not based in any sort of reality other than inside your own head and consciousness. And when you think of it that way, it's really a lot easier to let it go, I find. So I highly recommend some meditation. Just some time to yourself to just pay attention to your thoughts and notice what's working for you and what's not working for you. And by doing this, you're going to notice a lot of the things around you. There's music everywhere. Just this past week in my Berklee online class, the Sampling in Ableton Live, Advanced Techniques in Ableton Live Sampling, it's called. The project is to record things throughout your daily routine and make a track out of it, just using those sounds. And it's my favorite project of the whole semester. It's something we can all do today if you want. Just record everything you come across in your day and see what you got and make some music out of it. Now, what I always find every single time is that there are people that come up with samples and sounds based off of things that I come across every day and never noticed. For instance, I was really kind of surprised and laughed in one of the projects where a student used the sound of an egg cracking. And and it's just amazing to me because I eat eggs almost every single day. I usually start my day with like 2 hard-boiled eggs, and I crack an egg every day, and I never thought of it as a percussion sound. And as a person that's like always listening for things and trying to be on the lookout, I find it miraculous and amazing and dumbfounding that I never thought to record that. And it wound up being such a cool part of their piece. There's stuff around you all the time, and if you don't believe it, give yourself a little exercise wherever you are right now. Find everything you can within your sight that makes any kind of sound and just record it. Doesn't matter. A lot of people do this project at their desk, and they wind up finding like things like pens tapping on the desk are really useful, or papers crumpling, or ripping papers, or opening a drawer, or just the squeak of their chair. It can be anything. I'm always surprised at what people come up with, and almost shocked that I didn't come up with that too. And it's really inspiring to hear this particular project, because you realize that there is so much around you. So pay attention to the things that are around you. I do an exercise with my high school students in the English class when we talk about imagery. So imagery is just using descriptive writing with any of the 5 senses. So if you're describing the way something sounds or tastes or feels, or what are the others? Smells, any of the 5 senses, use that in your writing. It brings your writing to life. Because if you think about it, the way we experience our world is through our 5 senses. It's how we know we're in a world. If you were to close your eyes, which I think sight is probably, as a human, our most active sense that we rely upon the most. If you close your eyes, suddenly you pay a lot more attention to what you're hearing. If you lost your hearing and your sight, you'd probably do smelling, you'd feel. And if you were to lose everything, how would you even know that you are in a world, that you are in an environment? I don't know if we would know. We might not even be aware that we are in a place. We'd have our thoughts and our ideas and whatever goes on in our brain, but would we have any concept of the outside world? And a funny thing that this makes me think about is maybe we don't have enough senses to notice that we're somewhere else, we're inside some other thing, or there's some other circumstance that we're just completely unaware of because we don't have the senses to perceive it. So if you think for a second here, there's really a lot going on around you at all times. If you were to close your eyes and just listen, how many different sounds can you identify in this particular moment? There's probably the sound of outside, or your room, or some kind of machinery humming, or someone walking by. There might be music in the background. There might be just the sound of your own breathing. There's a ton of things. And they say our human brain is capable of processing millions, if not billions, of bits of information every second, but we're really only aware of something like 1,000 of them at any given time. And when I tell my students this, they like, I'm not even aware of 2 things right now. They'll joke. But when you really break it down and you think about all the things you're seeing right now, out of the corner of your eye, all the different objects and colors, all of the things you're hearing, all of the things you're feeling. You're feeling yourself sitting in a chair or standing on your feet. You can feel the clothes on your body, the headphones in your ears, the temperature. Is there a breeze? There's so much when you really break it down that we really don't pay a lot of attention to, because it's not always useful information for whatever we have to do on the day. But to be the observer, the artist, is a way to become more in touch with this stuff. Or maybe I should say becoming more in touch with your senses is a way to become more of the artist as the observer. I think we've all had the experience of some artist, some musician, or whatever it is, putting our thoughts and feelings about a topic in such a way that we relate to it so clearly that we almost can't believe we didn't come up with it ourselves. And that's because they're paying attention. They're noticing the things. They're noticing the tiny details that make things real. I think a really cool thing to do is pay attention to the stuff that you find inspiring yourself. So if it's music, what is it about the music? Is it the sound? Is it the arrangement? Is it the lyric? Is it the chord progression? What is it about it that you find interesting? Pay close attention to it and try to figure out why. When I was talking to Mark Cawley, the award-winning songwriter and author of Song Journey on the podcast, he talked a lot about having a list of ideas ready all the time and be like an active watcher, an active participant. So even if you're just watching TV, pay attention, listen for good lines, borrow them, steal them, change them around, flip them upside down. A lot of power, I think, comes from reversing things. When we hear something one way, then we hear it the other way. It kind of changes the way we look at it. So I like to do that a lot by flipping things over. Was just watching the series finale of Game of Thrones, and one of the points and themes that is in the books and the show is this idea that like love is the death of duty. So the best leaders are the ones that are unattached, and when you are in love, you have people you're attached to, and sometimes that becomes a conflict with what's best for your family and your loved ones is not always what's best for the larger society and people. And then, questions of loyalty come up. What are you supposed to do in those situations? How do you be loyal then? Because being loyal in one way is going to be disloyal in another way. So they say, love is the death of duty. And in the final episode, the character Tyrion says to Jon Snow, sometimes duty is the death of love. And this was a nice reversal because in this case, the character Jon Snow was struggling with what to do about the queen that he was in love with, but he also had a duty to the people, and he was at odds with what she had just done by burning down the whole city with her dragon. But this reversal is just a clever way of saying it, and it catches us. It takes us off guard a little bit and makes us reevaluate things. And I think this is a fun thing to do when you hear interesting bits of information or lyrics you like or lines you hear in the movies. Try flipping them around. It can be an interesting result. Yeah, sorry about that Game of Thrones tangent. I've been a little obsessed as of late. But anyway, we want to pay attention, borrow things, steal things. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a line from a movie or something someone says. But, that's, I guess, your own ethical belief. But we can find inspiration in the themes we see. So the idea is don't just watch and tune out, to be an active, observant participant, notice things. And in that idea, let's record everything. Man, the storage space is so cheap these days. It's so easy to record things. We can get a plethora of ideas. Even just if you're using your phone to record things, you don't need a special fancy piece of equipment. In fact, I like the way the phone sounds because it sounds kind of bad in, comparison to, say, like some high-tech rig. But in the truth, it sounds 100 times better than things we had many years ago. Use your phone. Don't let that get in your way, because even if you don't use the recording, the idea might still be there for you. And we can make a little folder inside our samples that is maybe dedicated to these ideas and have them ready for the next time we're going to make music. One thing I like to do is I like to share my recordings to a Dropbox folder. So I have a little Dropbox folder set up, and every time I record something, I just share it to that folder. And I have that folder as one of my places inside Ableton Live's browser. And it's just a really convenient way to just find the stuff that I want to use. So I record something, send it to Dropbox, and then the next time I open Ableton Live, I can go to that folder and it's there waiting for me, ready to go. And many times I've found that this folder has either jump-started an idea or helped me take an idea to a next place. So I don't always use them right away. Sometimes I come back to them after some time. Some of my Ableton Live packs were made this way, with sounds that I recorded and then kind of let sit for a while. Then when I was looking for something to do, found that and turned them into some packs. And that could be something you do as well. When you're the observer and you're not the creator so much, you don't let mistakes and problems frustrate you as much, because you're not trying to fight things. You're not trying to build against things. You're not trying to, as a builder, creator, you're not trying to clear cut a forest so you can put a parking lot up. Instead, you're going with the forest and using that to be part of what you're doing. You're observing what's going on and you're incorporating. So I think when things come up and problems arise, it's not so much that you're going to fight them, it's that you're going to find a way to go with it and observe the problem and use it to your benefit. And I think that's going to about wrap up this idea. Pay attention, observe things. Think of yourself as an artist, not someone that has to create things, but just notice things. And I think that's a way to kind of ease the pressure a little bit. And sometimes maybe gets us out of some of these ideas we have about artists needing to be tortured and go through difficult things to make good art. I don't think that's true. Of course, that's a great way to turn a negative into a positive, or turn something difficult into something you can actually make something that you like. But I think if you pay attention to what's going on too, you'll see these problems and these issues and themes all around you. And you can incorporate that into your sound, so you don't have to go suffer to make good music. I don't know if it's worth it to have to put yourself through misery in order to produce art. Be the noticer, be the observer. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little talk, this little pep talk for both you and me. I'm in an observation state right now as I explore this new piece of gear, and I want to encourage you to do the same. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Take care.